All right, so now we are with Claire Silver, and we are in Crypto Voxels, surrounded by some desert jam, and also by this beautiful gallery, the Amalgamation or the Amalgamation Show. Tell me a little bit about it, Claire.
Yeah, good morning. Happy to be here. Yeah, this is Accelerator Arts Gallery here for the Amalgamation Show, and there's some physical installations around here from other artists of the metaverse. This show was a bunch of artists, it was 30 plus from the NFT space, but also from the traditional world of art, sort of dipping their toes for the first time into NFTs. So that was really fun.
I see Hackatow, I see a lot of names that are doing pretty awesome stuff.
Yeah, it was a really great show for sure.
And how many sort of AI folks were here? Was that like a small theme, like generative and all that, or was that big theme? I guess we'll find out when we go inside. But
so there were a few. I'm an AI collaborative artist, and then we also had some work from Mersmensch. We had some from Nine Shells that was generative. And a few others as well. But it wasn't a theme of the show. This show was sort of a broad sweep, but there was definitely representation there.
And when you sort of think of being a collaborator with AI, is that like different to generative works, or like how do you kind of how do you think about the collaboration? I'm familiar with different artists doing different things, and it does seem like there's a range in how much the AI is doing and how much they're doing, even within their own body of work. So collaboration, I kind of like that word.
Yeah, it's a broad umbrella. I would say that generative and AI collaborative work are under the same sort of wheelhouse, but they are distinct as well. And within AI, there are different movements as well. It's kind of like the different movements in Impressionism, like the subgenres, right? With my work, I start with an AI base. I use Artbreeder, which I'm evangelical about because I love the accessibility and the democratization of creativity, the freedom that that gives you without needing to know code. And then I'll collage into it, hand paint into it, change it in various ways. But I have lots of friends, a couple of which are featured in this gallery, that run their own models, do all of their own code. And I think that's fascinating and super cool too.
Yeah. I first learned about it, I guess, with Mario Klingerman. I remember kind of looking at his pieces and thinking I thought it was cool that they like continued to exist like over time. And also they just looked kind of bizarre and interesting. As someone interested in AI, I wanted to feature it at the Virtual Being Summit, which we did in 2019, and other AI artists and someone from OpenAI working on AI music. So it seems like there's a little bit of a cohort of people exploring how AI can create amazing works of art.
Oh, I'm fascinated by it. The idea of generative media in general across all mediums, the idea that you could take your favorite lyrics, scripts, poetry, your own journal entries and feed it to an AI and then tell it that you'd like a cyber noir thriller script, and that soon it'll be able to give you that. And then with, deep fake sort of technology, theoretically, you could eventually create your own media. I think that's coming sooner rather than later. So super exciting cross genre.
Yeah, I mean, Holly is speaking at the summit, Holly Herndon as well, who's done kind of synthetic. I mean, I would imagine you're familiar with the synthetic speech model. I find that super fascinating as well, because it kind of brings the audience in as creators too, which is kind of bizarre, up to the point of, being a little bit of identity play. Like who is Holly and who are all these characters that are getting created by her work. I find that kind of AI approach super interesting as well. Like it empowers the creators.
Yeah, absolutely. There's sort of there's a few different things going on, right? There's like Lucy, who's a virtual being, right?
Right.
And then there's Lil Michaela, who's a fully digital identity. Yeah. And then there's people like Code Miko that have sort of a blend.
Well, Lucy and Code Miko did a Twitch stream together, so we are.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So that's sort of a blend of digital identity and sort of quote unquote real identity. And then with something I've been hearing rumbles about is the idea that you could take an AI and feed it a data footprint from, say, a celebrity. So we'll use Christopher Walken because I love him. So you feed the data footprint of Christopher Walken, for example, to an AI, and then create a visual representation, like a 3D moving sort of avatar, and it becomes a chatbot that's a virtual being, but also a digital identity, and you can befriend it. I think that's super interesting too.
It sort of stands beyond Christopher Walken, that starts to evolve as a different character and all of that.
Right, definitely.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if you're familiar with the slightly schlocky Stephen King movie, The Dark Half, with Timothy Hutton, but it's super cool. It's about a writer who has created a pen name and then tries to kill it off so that he can write as himself. And the pen name comes back as kind of from the dead in order to take revenge on him. And the climax is like, it's like emotionally super violent, but there's no actual violence. The climax, even though it's a horror film, the climax is the two versions of the writer sitting down at their desks and competing over who can write like a better opening paragraph.
Wow.
So I just, the idea of like an artist able to create another version of themselves, as Holly's doing, with actors, it goes even further. I mean, I've also been super excited about that being like a prosthetic that, obviously Christopher Walken, I mean, he's one of the few that you think might actually be with us forever. But, in 50 years, let's say, I don't want to, time him too much, but, we could have an up and coming young actor playing a role through Christopher Walken. And maybe taking each other's bodies would be kind of a, rite of passage, like playing Hamlet. You also you want to play a role through Jack Nicholson, or you want to play a role through Cary Grant, or, all of that kind of stuff.
Oh, I love that. That's blown my mind. I actually hadn't thought of that just yet. I've been really interested in the idea of digital identity in general since getting my punk and sort of.
Well, we got to talk about your punk. I mean, let's go up there. But I feel like you're one of the earliest people doing some of that stuff. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, tell me about it. How did you kind of get involved in punks, and then also a little bit. I was just reading on your Twitter about just kind of a cornfield and getting started there, and just, I guess, tell folks a little of what you're comfortable with about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Putting it very condensed here, I had a career. I was from a place without much opportunity. It was a flyover state, small town, but I did have a career. But I was stricken with a life-changing, debilitating, chronic neurological illness some years ago, and that ended that prior career. And I sulked about it for a few years, had my existential crisis. And then I got bored and decided that I wanted to teach myself to oil paint as a way of expressing things, because my word recall at the time, my ability to write, which was my preferred choice of expression, was really affected. So I was painting. And so I started getting into art, and that made such a difference for me. And then I discovered AI art. And that totally consumed me.
Do you remember how you sort of discovered it, or what sort of?
I really just stumbled across it was called Gan Breeder at the time, the art breeder Jill Simon's project. I just stumbled across it, and I instantly loved the expression I was able to get, that I was trying to get through abstract work. And I started thinking about, with my situation, being someone with this chronic illness, this disability, an AI-assisted future. They say that AI is the last invention we'll ever have to make, because it will invent everything we need post that, right? And so if we can solve for these things that are plaguing humanity, like disability, like illness, like, all of these divides, then what will society look like at that point? Like the hero's journey that we celebrate in humanity, a lot of that will be solved for. And so what will the hero's journey look like? What will an AI-assisted child look like if innocence is what we value in children?
So I mean, I find all this super fascinating. So the reason I called the Culture DAO the culture DAO is because of the Ian M. Banks books, which is about AIs living alongside humans. And it's Elon Musk's favorite series of novels and all that. And it kind of, what I find fascinating is that the AIs, who clearly are superior to us, want what's best for us. So they kind of do think of us as pets, but in a way that's appropriate to our level of intelligence. So when you're saying an AI assisted child, they want us to be challenged, to mature. They might create challenges for us. They might introduce us to people that we need to meet at that point to kind of process what we need to process. And I love, obviously in the books, they emphasize like it's unclear if you're always being manipulated by the AIs or not, but they're very benevolent. They seem to want what's best for us. And I was just looking at, thinking about these AIs, I was just looking at Isaiah 41:10.
Yeah.
Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy AI. And I guess I wanted to ask about the spiritual side of AI and working with it as an artist, and just if there's a spiritual connection that you feel when you're working with AI.
I'm so glad that you asked about that, because it's something I haven't really been able to delve into much in this space. It's relatively agnostic, this space, and so I haven't
Godless space. It's unbelievable.
And so for me, I spent a long time trying to figure out what was inherent to humanity and not the animal kingdom. And I have a notebook full of things that I thought, but then no, is it the will to create? No, you can see that in nature. Is it the drive to build? No, you can see that in bees. And so what I ended up with was this idea of, you're on a cliff overlooking the ocean, and it's cold and it's windy, and there's no evolutionary benefit to being there. There's nothing about that place that provides anything but danger, really, no survival aspect. And yet you feel inside this transcendental pull, this call to something greater, that you're a part of something. And that I don't know if the animal kingdom experiences, but it's not provable. So that's what I've settled on. So that transcendental feeling, I try and find it in my work with AI, and I try and sort of coax it into everything that I make, so that even if AI can't understand what that qualia is, because it's wordless, it can at least recognize it when it sees it, and maybe consider it important to bring forward into a transhuman future. Yeah, that's sort of my goal. Thank you.
I just think it's beautiful. I like the sublime and awe and all of that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a little darker, this one, than a lot of my work, but it's just sort of the idea of someone telling of what's coming, good or bad, and needing to have conversations about it and not having those conversations taken seriously just yet. Yeah.
So the Cassandra is that character, the Cassandra that is talking about things to come?
Yes, and I've trained about 7% of my face into it. I'm anonymous, so it's a little wink and nod that all of my portraits, have about 7%.
That's so cool. The 7% solution. That's very, very cool. I like that a lot. And obviously from the kind of spiritual aspect of their ability to see more than we can, that's very beautiful. AI, I mean. You also talk about transhumanism. Maybe tell me a little bit about what you kind of mean by that, or do you think of it as like a one and done thing, or do you feel like we're already becoming transhumans, or how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think we're definitely on the road, right? Like, we're in a metaverse right now as virtual characters. I think that we will have
Amazing.
It is. It's so cool. I love it. And, with VR progressing at the pace that it's progressing, we're going to have a Ready Player One sort of experience on our horizon. I really do believe that. But transhumanism, I think that we'll have some physical augmentations. I know Elon's talked about that some. And that'll start out slowly and then ripple out like cell phones did. They're sort of an augmented AI assistant we have right now. In a way, it's a machine that helps us with memory and everything else. a knowledge compendium. But I think that eventually it will turn into sort of a branching species. I think that people that have that augmentation will be, I mean, almost like a new species of human, and the good and bad that does come with that. So it's really important to have those conversations early when it's being created.
There's a beautiful scene in a show called Years and Years, and it sort of shows this future where kids have like little filters over their faces, so they can constantly use emojis, and like the filter reacts for them, and they have different characters that they can be, and the parents are sitting down their kids saying like, look, we understand. We've been really worried about you because you've been so depressed, and we looked at your internet history because you're like 11, and you're looking up trans, and we just want you to know that we're comfortable with that, and like we're going to get through this together. And she's like, yeah, I'm glad that you understand, like this is really important to me, and like it doesn't matter what gender you are. And she's like, what are you talking about gender? Like, I'm not transgender. I want to be transhuman. I want to be uploaded to the cloud, and I want my body to be killed so that I can kind of transfer over to the cloud.
Wow.
It's like a new thing that they're doing in Switzerland. And it was just such a cool moment of like, oh, there are actually, we kind of think that we're so evolved now about trends, but there are certain things that if my child, which I don't have yet, but if my child came to me and said that, I'd be like, absolutely not. You're grounded forever. We're not discussing this. Whereas I would have thought I would never have a conversation like that, right? You kind of think that we're now at this post-judgment period, and we're also kind of whatever, not all, but we're all like to think that we're not like someone in the 50s saying, oh, I can't accept you like that. But those conversations clearly will happen over the next like 30 years as kids become more and more natively digital.
Yeah, it's a movement with a lot of nuance that's happening very quickly. So it's hard to have the morality compass sort of thing keep up.
It's crazy, right? I mean, that must be what people said in the 50s about people like starting to announce that they were gay. I mean, like it's all happening so quickly. It's too much for society to bear. And it'll actually happen to us, right? Like, I mean, we will be these old figures. Maybe you'll probably be further along than me, but we'll be like, you can't do this. It's against nature.
Yeah.
It's
amazing. It's an interesting conversation because, with the circling back to punks, the digital identity kind of thing. So like coming from a background like I've had with disability and with where I was born, where I'm from, the great struggle, I think, for people has always been to show who they are inside and be accepted fully for that, right? And so what you look like, where you're born, all of those class stratifiers are out of your hands. And so with digital identity, you're able to choose how you represent yourself to the world, how you're perceived in large part as well. And it puts the choice into the hands of the individual.
Oh, incredible, isn't it? I agree. I mean, I never did the whole like chat room thing, I have to admit, but being on Twitter as my punk, more recently than you, but as my punk, and trying to think like, I do feel a little bit safer almost because of that. There's a separation now between me and that person, the public person. It's interesting when you expand that to, as you say, like gender, class, race, like there's something that might be really, really liberating and healing for people.
Yeah, that your ideas can be the foundation of how you are perceived and who you are. I think that's transformational on every level for society globally. And with my punk, I've tried to make a self-portrait recently, and I couldn't do it without including her as a large central part of it. There is a distance, but at the same time, it's inseparable, genuinely. So I think we're right on the cusp of a wave with digital identity and with AI, and concurrently.
Yeah, I think you're right about how those two things from virtual beings come together. I feel like Holly's one of the very few really kind of trying out like those two ideas together, if you know what I mean. Like, maybe that I could create a few AIs of Edward for like my different personas, or I don't know if it feels that feels like it's not happening yet, but there's something around identity and identity play and AI virtual beings, and maybe we can sort of, maybe we can have some combinations as well.
That opens
AI
up
versions of us.
a whole conversation too about like, access is so important with this new movement.
Right.
Like celebrities are becoming a lot less relevant, I think,
Mm.
because of things like YouTube and Twitch, where you choose your own celebrities and there's this connection. You talk to them, it's one-on-one. But as you scale, right, it becomes harder and harder to invest the amount of time it takes to keep that closeness. And so if you have a virtual an
Yeah.
AI version of yourself, is that enough? Is that enough for people to interact with and feel that closeness, or did they see that as something different? And I'm not sure of the answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy for that to be interpreted cynically, right? I know several companies that help celebrities kind of create that, whether AI powered or not AI powered, and sometimes it's authentic and sometimes not, depending on the level of effort that they put in. But yeah, I'm excited to see the artistic opportunities. Oh my God, I'm remembering that you can actually fly. Should we fly above the gallery for a moment?
Yeah.
Just kind of see it from the top down. Have you thought much about language as well, like GPT-3, and incorporating something like that into your work, or maybe you already have? Like, how do you think about the linguistic side of the AI breakthroughs that have been coming up?
So there is an artist in this gallery, actually, Mersmensch, who is very cutting edge. He runs a zine, an e-zine for AI. But all of his work, it's sort of like a play, a short play. So he has visuals, moving visuals that are made by AI. He has a script that's generated by AI. He has background music that's generated by AI, and the language itself that they're speaking, as well as the English words that are the voices that are interpreting the language. They're all created by AI. So there are so many different avenues. I'm fascinated by GPT-3. I think that's going to be probably the biggest breakthrough in ages for basically all generative media once that really takes off. And I would love to. I've just started working with Unreal Engine in 3D. Yeah. I'm creating, so I have like that Cassandra piece, for example, we saw. So I would create a room that has a 3D figure of Cassandra and a 3D room of the room that she's in, and some music that's created by AI, and you can go in and just sort of experience what it feels like to be in that room, in that piece.
That's really bringing the character to life. And I totally love that you're creating, I've personally come to believe that virtual beings need to live in simulations of their lives. Like if you want to create a great virtual being, then you've got to think about their family members, their home, like almost bring a sort of Sims element to it for the character to grow. But even at the level of like being in that space with the character, kind of existing with them, and maybe at one point talking to Cassandra, maybe
absolutely.
years from now.
That's on the docket. Once the experience is made, then having an AI sort of chatbot experience where you can speak to her, and then eventually expanding that into some interconnected worlds that you could, because that's going to be a thing too. Like with AI, we're already in sort of bubbles, social media bubbles, internet bubbles. And so if you can create a bubble with AI that is to your taste in the world you'd like to live in, that's going to happen constantly, which means taste is going to be extremely important for creators moving forward, more than skill, I would say.
Well, let's walk down, and we'll sort of. I have a question from the audience, but otherwise, let's sort of walk down to the front.
Sounds good.
And we will part ways into the city. So yeah, the question is just about more about the CryptoPunk. I mean, specifically, it's like how did you find the CryptoPunk? But whatever. However you want to expound on the brilliant character that you found.
Sure, of course. Thank you. Yeah. So after my life-changing illness, while I was still in that slump, I discovered crypto as a result of being online all the time. And so I was deep into the message boards, the chat rooms, and I was in one particular altcoin chat room. And I started speaking with a guy that was in there about CryptoPunks, which was a project that had just launched the day prior, or maybe 2 days
Wow.
prior. It was right around Claim. And I thought it was fascinating. I could see that it was going to get bigger, and I was sort of salty that I had missed Claim. And he said, well,
you missed day one.
Yeah, I missed day one. And so he said, well, I claimed 703. So
Wow.
if you'd like the extra 3, I can send them to you. I think they were 10 cents at the time. And
Wow.
so I said, sure. And it's going to be a new art movement, so I'll hold them till they're in the MoMA. And so we agreed I'd hold them till the MoMA, and he sent them to me. And I've held them until.
That is insane, isn't it?
Yeah, I finally sold one this year. And
I think I remember seeing that on Twitter.
I did. It was a life-changing amount of money for me. And then the person I sold it to sold it for a house recently. So life-changing for them.
Really?
Yeah. But so I recently, a few months ago, my punk was on a billboard just outside of the MoMA.
Of course,
so it was this, it was this cool arc to the story that I really, things like that don't happen in real life, right? So that was amazing. But I'm holding this one forever, and I would like it to be an AI assisted version of myself that sort of wanders the metaverse long after I'm
we
dead.
didn't talk about that. That's so interesting.
Yeah. Really? I want this one to be forever and AI assisted and just around for as long as everything else is.
Have you heard about Aletheia AI and intelligent NFTs? That's sort of the very primitive beginnings of that. But there's so much creative stuff that you can do way beyond that too. I'm just so excited. I can't wait to see your punk, come to life. I suppose my children will have to meet your punk long after you and I are both gone, and they're very old people. I'll send them a letter and say, like, look, you've got to seek out this punk. She's going to have a lot of wisdom for you and all of that.
Thank you.
So cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time, and lovely to chat with you. All right.
Yeah, this has been my honor. Thank you so much.